The doghouse door was open, the chain was broken, and still the German shepherd refused to leave. Staff Sergeant Ethan Cole saw the shape beneath the snow only because the wind changed. One moment, the abandoned yard looked flat and white beneath the Montana morning. The next, a dark corner of wood appeared behind the house, half buried beside a leaning fence. Ethan stopped the utility truck at the edge of the road and listened. The storm had passed before dawn, but the air still moved through the pines with a low, restless sound. Snow pressed against the windows of the empty home. A frozen metal bowl lay upside down near the porch. No tire tracks crossed the driveway. No smoke rose from the chimney. Ethan had been delivering blankets, canned food, and heating fuel to families outside Helena since sunrise. He had already checked 6 properties. This one was supposed to be vacant. Then he heard it. Not a bark. Not a whine. A faint scraping sound beneath the snow. Ethan pulled on his gloves and walked around the side of the house. His boots sank nearly 8 inches with every step. The doghouse stood behind a row of dead shrubs, its roof bowed beneath the weight of ice. A length of chain stretched from a post to the doorway, but the final link had snapped long ago. The entrance was clear. Whatever lived inside could have walked away. Ethan crouched and brushed snow from the frame. "Easy," he said, keeping his voice low. 2 amber eyes opened in the darkness. The German shepherd lay curled against the back wall, sable coat dulled by cold and age, muzzle touched with silver. Frost clung to the tips of her fur. Her breathing was shallow but steady. She did not lunge. She did not retreat. She simply watched him with the stillness of an animal that had already made a decision. Between her front paws rested a narrow purple ribbon. The color looked almost impossible in that frozen place, bright against the gray wood and white snow. Ethan reached for the blanket tucked under his arm. The dog lowered her head over the ribbon. "I am not taking it," he murmured. "I am just trying to help you." He placed the blanket near the entrance and slid a small dish of warm water beside it. The shepherd sniffed the air but did not move. Ethan noticed the old leather collar around her neck, cracked at the buckle, no tag visible. He also noticed something else. There were no fresh paw prints leading away from the shelter. Only a narrow circle in the snow where she had paced between the doorway and the side of the house. She had food within reach, freedom beyond the fence, and enough strength to leave. Yet she had stayed. Ethan removed one glove and extended his hand, palm down. The dog studied it. Then, slowly, she nudged the purple ribbon toward him with her nose. Ethan leaned closer. 3 tiny white stitches crossed one end of the fabric. His breath caught. He had seen that pattern before, years ago, sewn into field gear by a Marine who never trusted printed labels. Ethan moved his fingers toward the ribbon. The shepherd's paw came down over it at once. Not hard, not threatening, protective. She wanted him to see it. She did not want him to take it. Ethan looked from the stitches to the dog's eyes, and the cold seemed to deepen around him. "Owen," he whispered. At the sound of the name, the German shepherd did not blink. She only drew the ribbon closer and stared past Ethan toward the abandoned house, as if the real answer was still waiting inside. Ethan stayed beside the doghouse until the shepherd finally drank. She moved only far enough to reach the dish, keeping one front paw pressed over the purple ribbon, as if even warmth could not be trusted. The sight pulled at something old in him. 8 years earlier, Owen Hart had marked every piece of personal gear with 3 white stitches. Gloves, pack straps, a battered field notebook. He said labels peeled away, ink faded, but thread held. Ethan had laughed at the habit then. Now the same pattern lay beneath a German shepherd's paw in an abandoned yard outside Helena. He reached for his radio and called Dr. Claire Bennett, the veterinarian who had volunteered with the winter relief route. "I found a dog," he said. "Older German shepherd. Cold, weak, alert. She will not leave a ribbon." Claire was quiet for a moment. "Bring the ribbon too." Ethan looked at the shepherd. That may be the difficult part. He returned to the truck for a carrier blanket and a thermos of warm broth. When he came back, the dog was watching the house again, her ears tilted toward the dark windows. Ethan sat in the snow several feet away, letting the silence settle. "You know Owen," he said softly. The shepherd's eyes shifted to him. "So did I." He placed the broth near the entrance and waited. A minute passed. Then 2. The dog licked the edge of the bowl. Ethan kept talking, not because she understood every word, but because his voice gave the cold something gentler to hold. He told her Owen had been stubborn, loyal, and terrible at cards. He told her Owen never left a promise unfinished. At the word promise, the shepherd raised her head. Ethan glanced at the ribbon. "I will bring it," he said. "You have my word." The dog studied him, then lifted her paw. Ethan did not touch the ribbon. Instead, he folded the blanket around both her and the strip of purple fabric, keeping it between her front legs. She allowed him to lift her. She was lighter than she should have been, all bone, cold fur, and quiet resistance. In the truck, she lay on the passenger side floor with the ribbon beneath her chin. The road to Claire's clinic took 25 minutes through packed snow and pine-shadowed hills. Ethan drove slowly. Each time the truck turned, the shepherd braced herself but never let the ribbon slide away. Claire met them at the rear entrance. She was in her early 40s, with dark hair tied back and a navy jacket over green scrubs. "Easy, girl," she said. The shepherd accepted the examination with tired dignity. Her temperature was low, but her heartbeat was steady. No broken bones. No sign of recent injury. Only dehydration, age, and exposure. "She is lucky," Claire said. Ethan looked at the ribbon. "I do not think luck kept her there." Claire warmed fluids and scanned the microchip. A number appeared, followed by an old registration name. Mara Hart. Ethan felt the room narrow. Claire read the record twice. Owner listed as Corporal Owen Hart. Ethan looked down at Mara. "Owen died 2 years ago." Claire searched the remaining file. The emergency contact field was empty. The address matched the abandoned house. Ethan touched the 3 white stitches with one finger, careful not to move the ribbon. Mara did not stop him this time. Claire watched the dog's eyes follow his hand. "She trusts you." Ethan shook his head. "Not yet." Claire turned toward the hallway and called to an assistant. "Can someone bring Abigail's intake file from storage?" Mara rose so suddenly the blanket slipped from her back. Her ears stood high. The ribbon fell from beneath her chin, but she did not look at it. She stared at Claire instead, breathing faster. Ethan stepped closer. "Say that name again." Claire looked at him, then at the dog. "Abigail." Mara moved toward the clinic door with a strength she had not shown all morning. The purple ribbon lay behind her on the floor, forgotten for the first time. Mara reached the clinic door and stood there, trembling with effort. Her nose lifted toward the hallway, as if the name had opened a path only she could see. Ethan picked up the ribbon and folded it carefully into his coat pocket. "Who is Abigail?" he asked. Claire looked toward the records room. "I am not sure yet." The name was attached to an archived family file, but the system is incomplete. An assistant returned carrying a thin paper folder with a faded label. Claire opened it on the counter. Inside were old vaccination records, a school health form, and a photograph clipped to the first page. The picture showed a little girl of about 6 standing beside Mara in a backyard full of summer light. The dog was younger, darker around the muzzle, and wearing the same purple ribbon tied loosely around her collar. The girl had one hand buried in Mara's fur and a smile wide enough to make the image feel warm even in the cold clinic room. On the back, someone had written Abigail Hart, age 6. Ethan stared at the photograph. Owen had mentioned a daughter once, but only in passing, years before fatherhood became something too personal to discuss across long distances. "How old would she be now?" he asked. Claire counted silently. "About 11. Mara turned at the sound of the photograph sliding across the counter. She moved back toward Ethan, placed her nose against the image, and gave a soft, broken whine. It was the first sound she had made since he found her. Claire searched the remaining pages. There is no current address. No active guardian listed. The contact information was removed after the family moved. Ethan looked at Mara. Then why did she go back to the old house? Claire did not answer. The dog did. She walked to Ethan's coat, pressed her nose against the pocket holding the ribbon, then looked toward the clinic door. The message was simple enough. "Take it. Follow me." Ethan knelt and showed her the ribbon. Mara touched it once, then paced toward the door again. "She wants to leave," Claire said. "She wants to show us something," Ethan replied. By noon, Mara's temperature had risen enough for Claire to approve a short trip, provided they kept her wrapped and warm. Ethan carried her to the truck, though she resisted being lifted until he placed the ribbon beneath the blanket beside her. The drive back to the abandoned house was quieter than before. Mara remained alert despite her weakness, watching every turn through the windshield. When Ethan passed the main road and continued toward town, she gave a low whine. He slowed. "You want the house?" Mara stood, unsteady but certain. Ethan turned around. Snow had begun falling again by the time they reached the property. The wind moved loose powder across the yard in thin silver sheets. Ethan opened the truck door, and Mara stepped down before he could lift her. She walked slowly toward the doghouse, stopped at the entrance, then turned to make sure he was following. Inside, she touched the ribbon with her nose, looked at Ethan, and scratched once at the wooden floor. Ethan crouched beside her. "What is under there?" Mara repeated the movement. "Ribbon." Ethan. "Floor." He remembered the narrow pacing track around the shelter and the way she had stared past him toward the house. He pressed his glove against the nearest board. It shifted slightly. Beneath the edge, something metallic caught the gray daylight. Mara sat back and watched. Ethan pulled the board free. Hidden below was a small metal box wrapped in oilcloth, untouched by snow. On top of it rested a brass key and a folded photograph. Ethan opened the picture first. Owen stood beside Mara and Abigail, one hand on each of them. Across the back, in Owen's unmistakable handwriting, were 9 words. "If Mara brings you here, she has chosen you." Ethan read the sentence twice while Mara watched him from the doghouse doorway. The snow gathered along her back, but she did not move until he lifted the metal box from beneath the floor. It was smaller than a lunch tin and heavier than it looked. The brass key had been taped to the lid, and beneath it was a strip of paper with one number written in black ink. 17. Ethan carried the box to the truck, wrapped Mara in the blanket, and drove back toward Helena with the photograph tucked inside his coat. The number stayed in his mind. 17. Owen had always favored simple systems. Nothing random, nothing wasted. At the Veterans Hall on Cedar Street, a row of old storage lockers lined the basement wall. Ethan had not entered the building in years, but the caretaker still remembered his name. "Locker 17 is in the back," the man said. "Been paid through last December." The key turned on the first try. Inside was a canvas bag, a sealed envelope, and a digital recorder with a dead battery. Ethan borrowed fresh batteries from the front desk and sat alone at a wooden table while Mara rested beneath his chair. The purple ribbon lay across his palm. He pressed the button. Static filled the room, followed by Owen's voice, older and quieter than Ethan remembered. "If you found this, then Mara did what I asked." Ethan closed his eyes. Mara lifted her head. "She always was better at keeping promises than I was," Owen continued. The ribbon belonged to Abigail. She wore it during her first school performance. Purple was the only color she would agree to wear. After her mother died, Mara became the one thing that could calm her when the nights got too quiet. Ethan looked down at the shepherd. Mara's eyes were fixed on the recorder. "I do not know how much time I have," Owen said. "My mother is helping with Abigail, but if something happens and the family gets separated, I need you to find her. Mara will take you where the paperwork cannot." The recording paused, then resumed with a faint click. "Do not take Mara to Rachel until you know why she—" The voice cut off. The recorder went silent. Ethan pressed play again. Nothing. He replaced the batteries. Still nothing. "Rachel." The name was written inside the envelope. "Rachel Hart, Bozeman, Montana. Current guardian of Abigail Hart." Ethan felt a knot form beneath his ribs. Owen had started a warning and never finished it. Was Rachel unsafe, or was the danger somewhere else? He opened the canvas bag. Inside were copies of Abigail's school records, Mara's veterinary history, several missing dog flyers, and a small notebook filled with dates. The final page listed 3 words: house, ribbon, floor. Mara stood and moved toward the basement stairs. Ethan followed her into the lobby, where afternoon light pressed pale against the windows. He showed her the photograph of Abigail. "Is this who we are looking for?" Mara touched the picture with her nose. Then she turned toward the door. The caretaker stepped aside as Ethan fastened the leash. "Where are you headed?" he asked. Ethan looked at the address in the envelope. Bozeman. The drive would take nearly 2 hours in good weather, longer with snow on the highway. Outside, the sky had darkened, and the first flakes had begun to fall again. Ethan opened the truck door. Mara climbed in without hesitation, the ribbon held gently between her teeth. For the first time since he found her, she did not look back toward the old house. The highway to Bozeman stretched beneath a pale winter sky, the mountains rising in blue-gray layers beyond the windshield. Ethan kept both hands steady on the wheel while Mara lay on the passenger seat, the purple ribbon resting between her paws. Every few miles, she lifted her head to watch the road, as if she knew the direction even when the snow covered every familiar landmark. Ethan had driven this route before, years ago, when Owen was still alive and the future had not yet narrowed into unanswered messages. He remembered Owen talking about Rachel then. Younger sister. Practical. Protective. The one who remembered birthdays and paid bills on time. Nothing in those memories matched the warning buried in the broken recording. That uncertainty followed Ethan all the way into Bozeman. Rachel's address led them to a small duplex near the edge of town, its porch swept clean and a paper snowflake taped inside the front window. A stack of missing dog flyers sat beneath the mailbox, the top page faded by weather. Mara saw them before Ethan did. She stood in the truck, ears high, body tense. Ethan stepped out and walked to the porch. Before he could knock, the door opened. Rachel Hart looked older than the photograph in Owen's file, but the family resemblance was immediate. Same steady eyes, same serious mouth. She wore a wool sweater and held a roll of tape in one hand. Behind her, the kitchen table was covered with more flyers, maps, and notes. Mara's name appeared in large letters across every page. Rachel stared past Ethan toward the truck. Her face changed. Mara, the shepherd gave one sharp cry and pushed against the passenger door. Ethan opened it, and Mara stepped down carefully. Rachel moved forward, then stopped herself, lowering both hands. Easy, girl. Mara approached, sniffed her coat, and allowed Rachel to touch the side of her neck. Rachel's eyes filled at once. We have been looking everywhere. Ethan studied the flyers. Some were dated 6 weeks earlier. Others showed roads near Helena, veterinary clinics, shelters, and highway stops. This was not the home of someone who had abandoned a dog. Why was she at the old house, he asked. Rachel looked toward Mara. Because that is where Abigail last saw her. She invited Ethan inside. The rooms were warm but modest, with children's books stacked near the couch and a framed photograph of Owen on the mantel. Rachel explained that after Owen died, their mother cared for Abigail and Mara. When their mother's health declined, Rachel became Abigail's guardian. The landlord allowed children, but not large dogs. Mara went to a trusted foster family 20 miles away. She escaped twice. The second time, she disappeared completely. I thought she was trying to find Abigail, Rachel said. I did not realize she had gone back to guard the house. Ethan placed the recorder on the table and played the broken message. Rachel listened until Owen's voice stopped at her name. She closed her eyes. He was not warning you about me. She reached into a desk drawer and removed a sealed letter with Ethan's name on it. Owen sent this before he died. I was told not to open it unless Mara returned to the old property. Ethan broke the seal. The letter contained one unfinished sentence. Do not take Mara to Rachel until you know why she keeps returning to the house. Beneath it, Owen had written a second line. She is not waiting for Abigail. She is protecting what Abigail has not yet seen. Ethan looked at Mara. The dog had moved to the front window, staring toward the road. Where is Abigail now? Rachel hesitated. At school. She will be home in 20 minutes. Mara turned at the sound of the girl's name. The purple ribbon slipped from her paws onto the floor. Rachel picked it up and pressed it to her chest. She wore this the last day she lived in that house. A school bus appeared at the end of the block. Mara saw it and began to tremble. Ethan opened the front door. The bus stopped. A girl in a red coat stepped down and looked toward the porch. Mara moved forward one pace, then stopped. Abigail saw her. Her backpack slid from one shoulder. Mara, she whispered. The shepherd's ears lifted, but instead of running to the girl, she turned her head toward the west, back toward Helena, back toward the old doghouse. Ethan understood before anyone spoke. The reunion was not the end. Mara still had something left to finish. Abigail stood at the curb with one glove half removed, staring at the German shepherd as if the winter afternoon had opened a door into another life. Mara watched her, trembling from nose to tail, but still did not cross the yard. The distance between them was less than 30 feet. It felt much farther. Rachel stepped onto the porch and held the purple ribbon out where the dog could see it. She remembers you, she said softly. Abigail lowered her backpack to the sidewalk. She had Owen's steady eyes and the same careful way of waiting before she spoke. Mara, she called again. The shepherd took one step forward. Then she stopped and looked west. Ethan followed her gaze toward the road leading back to Helena. The meaning settled slowly. Mara had found the girl, but she was not finished. She wants us to go back, he said. Rachel looked at the letter in his hand. Then we go back. They left before sunset, Rachel and Abigail following Ethan's truck in a small sedan. Mara rode beside Ethan, restless but focused, rising whenever the highway curved toward the mountains. Abigail kept the purple ribbon with her. 2 hours later, the abandoned house appeared through the falling snow, dark against the white field. Mara was out of the truck the moment Ethan opened the door. She crossed the yard with more strength than she had shown all day and went directly to the doghouse. Abigail followed slowly. At the entrance, Mara touched the first loose board, then moved her paw to the back corner. Ethan knelt and pressed against the wood. Nothing shifted. Mara scratched once, paused, then scratched again at a narrower plank hidden beneath the bedding. Ribbon. Abigail. Floor. The pattern returned. Ethan removed the blanket and found a second layer of boards beneath it. One plank carried 3 white stitches burned into the grain, the same mark Owen had used on everything he meant to keep. Ethan worked the edge loose with a flat tool from the truck. Beneath it was a sealed plastic sleeve, dry despite the cold. Inside rested a letter addressed to Abigail and a small metal tag on a silver chain. 2 words were engraved across the front. Stay kind. Abigail held the tag in both hands. Rachel turned away for a moment, pressing her lips together. Ethan gave the letter to the girl. She opened it carefully. Owen's handwriting filled a single page. Abigail read in silence until her eyes reached the final lines. Her shoulders shook once, but she did not look away. Then she knelt in the snow beside Mara. Dad said you would keep this safe until I was ready, she whispered. Mara lowered her head. Abigail untied the purple ribbon from around her wrist and fastened it gently to the dog's collar. The color rested against the worn leather, bright and familiar. For the first time since Ethan had found her, Mara stepped fully out of the doghouse without looking back. She moved to Abigail and pressed her forehead against the girl's chest. Abigail wrapped both arms around her. No one spoke. The wind softened around the yard, carrying the clean scent of snow and pine. Ethan stood near the broken fence with Owen's letter folded in his pocket. Rachel came beside him. He chose you because he knew you would listen to her, she said. Ethan watched Mara settle at Abigail's feet. No, he replied. She chose me because she needed someone to follow. Abigail rose, still holding the chain. Mara stayed beside her as they walked toward the cars. Behind them, the doghouse remained open and empty. The chain lay broken in the snow. What had once looked like abandonment now revealed itself as a post kept through winter, a promise guarded until the right hands arrived. The return to Bozeman felt different. Mara no longer watched the road as if searching for a direction. She lay across the back seat beside Abigail, her head resting on the girl's coat while the purple ribbon moved softly against her collar. Rachel drove with both hands fixed on the wheel, glancing into the mirror every few minutes as though afraid the moment might vanish. Ethan followed in his truck, Owen's letter folded inside his jacket, the small brass key and empty recorder on the passenger seat. Snow passed beneath the headlights in quiet waves. By the time they reached the duplex, the neighborhood had gone still. Porch lights glowed through the cold. Abigail carried Mara's blanket inside and spread it beside her bed, but the shepherd ignored it. She circled once, then settled directly across the doorway. Abigail smiled through tired eyes. She used to sleep there, she said. Dad said she liked to guard both the room and the hallway. Mara lowered her head onto her paws. The old position returned without instruction. Ethan stood near the door, watching the girl place the engraved tag on her nightstand beside a framed photograph of Owen. Rachel joined him in the hall. I wish I had known what he planned, she said. I thought sending Mara to the foster family was the kindest choice. Ethan looked toward the room. You kept Abigail safe. Mara kept the promise. Neither one of you failed. Rachel exhaled slowly, as if she had been holding that breath for 2 years. The landlord remained a problem. He had already warned Rachel once about keeping large animals. Mara could stay that night, but not forever. Ethan saw the fear return to Abigail's face when Rachel explained. Mara lifted her head at once. She could not understand every word, but she knew the shape of loss. Ethan looked around the small duplex, then at the stack of missing dog flyers on the kitchen table. Give me a week, he said. Rachel frowned. For what? A place where nobody has to choose between the girl and the dog. The next morning, Ethan called every veterans group, housing office, and property manager he knew between Bozeman and Helena. He told the story plainly. No exaggeration. No request for pity. By noon, Owen's former unit had shared the search. By evening, a retired Marine named Walter Briggs offered a small rental house on the edge of town, with a fenced yard, 2 bedrooms, and no restriction on dogs. The rent was lower than Rachel expected. The deposit had already been covered by men who remembered Owen. 3 days later, they stood inside the empty house, while winter sunlight crossed the wooden floor. Mara walked from room to room, sniffing each corner. Abigail followed, carrying the purple ribbons loose in between 2 fingers. In the backyard, Ethan and Walter repaired a weak section of fence. Rachel unpacked dishes in the kitchen. The house smelled of pine boards, coffee, and new beginnings. Ethan built a doghouse near the porch using cedar planks and a sloped roof strong enough for Montana snow. He painted no name across it. He added no chain. When it was finished, Abigail placed the old blanket inside. Mara inspected it, stepped in, then immediately came back out and lay beside the back door instead. Ethan laughed softly. She has had enough of sleeping outside. Abigail sat beside her and ran a hand over the silver fur along her muzzle. Then she can stay with me. That evening, they ate soup around a folding table while Mara rested beneath Abigail's chair. Owen's letter stood on the mantel in a simple frame, the engraved tag beside it. Ethan stayed longer than he intended. When he finally rose to leave, Mara followed him to the front door. For a moment, he thought she might come with him. Instead, she touched her nose to his hand, then returned to Abigail. Ethan understood. He had not found a dog to keep. He had helped a guardian finish the journey home. In the weeks that followed, the new house began to sound lived in. Floorboards creaked beneath morning steps. The kettle whistled before sunrise. Abigail's school books gathered on the kitchen table beside Rachel's grocery lists, and Mara's nails clicked softly from room to room as she learned every doorway, every window, every place the girl might need her. Ethan visited on Saturdays. Sometimes he brought lumber for the fence or bags of dog food from Claire's clinic. Sometimes he brought nothing at all. Mara always met him at the porch, the purple ribbon still tied around her collar, though its edges had begun to soften with wear. She would touch her nose to his hand, then lead him inside as if reporting that the family remained safe. By early spring, Ethan began volunteering with a veterans organization that helped retired working dogs reconnect with former handlers and military families. Owen's notebook became the first guide. The brass key, the recorder, and the careful trail of records showed Ethan how easily a promise could become lost between offices, addresses, and years. He spent evenings making calls, checking microchip numbers, and driving to shelters across western Montana. Mara sometimes joined him when Abigail was at school. She sat in the passenger seat with the dignity of a dog who understood the work. On one trip, she helped calm an anxious shepherd whose former handler had been searching for him for nearly a year. Ethan watched the two reunite in a shelter yard beneath a pale afternoon sun. The veteran knelt. The dog leaned into him. No one needed to explain what had returned. When Ethan came back to Bozeman that evening, Abigail was waiting on the porch. "Did they find each other?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "They did." She looked down at Mara. "Dad would like that." The words stayed with Ethan. For years, he had believed remembering Owen meant carrying the weight of everything unfinished. Now he began to understand that memory could also become direction. Inside the house, Rachel had framed a copy of Owen's letter beside the engraved tag. The original purple ribbon remained on Mara's collar, but Abigail had placed a second ribbon in the frame, bright and clean, a reminder that some things could be preserved without being trapped in the past. Mara's health improved slowly. Her coat regained its shine. Her appetite returned. She still moved carefully on cold mornings, and Claire prescribed medicine for the stiffness in her hips, but the old dog seemed younger whenever Abigail came home from school. She would rise before the bus reached the corner and wait by the window, ears high, tail moving against the floor. One rainy evening, Ethan found Abigail sitting beside Mara near the back door. The unused cedar doghouse stood in the yard, dry beneath the porch light. "She never sleeps in it," Abigail said. Ethan sat beside them. "Maybe she does not need to guard anything out there anymore." Abigail rested her hand on Mara's shoulder. "Do you think she knew I would come back?" Ethan looked at the ribbon, then at the dog's peaceful eyes. I think she knew someone had to keep believing until you did. Mara shifted closer to the girl. Thunder rolled faintly beyond the hills, but she did not look toward the yard. She placed her head across Abigail's lap and closed her eyes. The cold house in Helena, the broken chain, and the buried letters no longer held her attention. What she had protected was no longer hidden beneath wood and snow. It was alive beside her, warm beneath her chin, breathing in the quiet room. By the time the first snow returned to Bozeman, the house no longer felt borrowed. Rachel had painted the kitchen a soft cream color. Abigail's drawings covered the refrigerator. A row of boots waited by the back door, and Mara's bed rested beside the girl's room, though the old German shepherd still preferred the doorway, where she could watch both hall and window. The cedar doghouse remained in the yard, clean and unused, its roof holding a thin white layer beneath the morning sky. Ethan arrived just after sunrise carrying a small wooden box. Mara heard his truck before anyone else. She rose carefully, crossed the living room, and stood at the door with the purple ribbon moving against her collar. When Ethan entered, she greeted him with the familiar touch of her nose against his hand. "Good morning, partner," he said. Abigail came down the stairs in wool socks, her hair still loose from sleep. "What is in the box?" Ethan set it on the table. Inside was a brass plaque no larger than a postcard. The Veterans Organization had opened a permanent program for retired working dogs and military families, and the first room would carry Owen's name. Abigail traced the engraved letters with one finger. Owen Hart Family Reconnection Room. Beneath the name was a shorter line. No promise left behind. Rachel stood near the stove, one hand around a coffee mug. Her eyes shone, but she smiled. "He would have pretended not to care," she said. Ethan nodded. Then he would have checked the spelling twice. Abigail laughed, and the sound filled the room in a way grief never could. Later that afternoon, they drove to Helena for the opening. Mara rode in the back seat beside Abigail, wrapped in the same blanket Ethan had used the morning he found her. The purple ribbon had faded at the edges, but Abigail refused to replace it. "It still knows the way," she said. The new center occupied a renovated brick building near the Veterans Hall. Inside, photographs lined the walls. Men and women kneeling beside old working dogs. Children holding leashes. Families standing together after years of searching. Ethan had helped connect 9 dogs with former handlers since spring. Each reunion looked different. Some began with barking, some with silence, some with a single touch of a nose to an open hand. All of them carried the same quiet recognition. Mara moved slowly through the room, greeting strangers without fear. At the far wall hung Owen's photograph with Abigail and Mara. Below it rested a copy of the letter found beneath the doghouse floor. The original remained safe at home. No long explanation accompanied the display. Only 3 small objects beneath glass. A brass key, a metal tag engraved with "Stay Kind," a fresh purple ribbon. Abigail stood before them for a long time. Ethan stayed several feet away. He had learned that love did not always need to step closer. Sometimes it only needed to remain present. On the drive back to Bozeman, snow began falling in wide, gentle flakes. Mara watched it through the window, her amber eyes reflecting the white fields and dark pines. Years earlier, snow had surrounded her like a wall. Now it was only weather passing outside a warm car. That evening, Abigail turned on the lamp beside her bed. The old purple ribbon cast a narrow shadow across Mara's collar. Rachel read downstairs. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, finishing a set of records for another missing K9. Mara looked toward the window as snow gathered on the unused doghouse. She watched for a moment, then turned away. Abigail climbed beneath the blankets and rested one hand against the dog's silvered muzzle. Mara lowered herself beside the bed, breathing slow and deep. There was nothing left beneath the old floorboards. Nothing left waiting in the cold. The promise had been opened, carried home, and given a place among the living. Outside, winter covered the yard in white. Inside, Mara closed her eyes beneath the warm yellow light, no longer guarding what had been lost, but resting beside what had returned.